Today, I'm going to walk through how you can use Gadget's Preact hooks and packages to build your Shopify UI extensions with Preact and Polaris web components. Let's get started. Hey everybody, I'm just going to be going through this building with Shopify UI extensions tutorial in the Gadget docs. I am going to include a link to this page in the video description. Now, Shopify's latest API version, that's 2025-10 as of shooting this video, introduced a bunch of new changes to the extension ecosystem. Three major changes. One is that when you generate a new extension with the Shopify CLI, it uses Preact instead of React. The second big change is that because we're building in Preact and not React, we're no longer using Polaris React. It's actually been deprecated. And instead, we're going to use Polaris web components to build our extensions. The third change that is enabled by using web components and by using Preact is that there is a bundle size limit on your extensions. Check out the documentation. I don't want to give a number right now. 64 kilobytes is the latest I've seen, but just in case Shopify updates that number and you're seeing this later, always check out Shopify's documentation or their community, their partner community for the latest up-to-date number there. Here at Gadget, we built a Preact hooks package so that you can interact with your APIs when you're building your extensions, just like you were when you were building with React. If you haven't used Gadget to build an extension before, this tutorial is going to walk through everything. But if you have, the API from the Preact package looks very similar. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go to not gadget.dev. I'm going to go to gadget.new, not gadget.mu, gadget.new, and I'm going to create my new app. I am just going to walk through this tutorial. Step one is just creating my app and connecting to Shopify. So I'll select Shopify type. I'm going to build a custom app, and I'll just call this my Preact extension. I'm going to create it. And if you haven't worked with Gadget before, it is a full stack hosted and scaled app development platform. So you do get a hosted and scaled full stack app. We're going to give you a Postgres database under the hood. It's a serverless node backend. And then there is still a React front end. It is powered by Vite. And then on top of that, we've got our Shopify connection that's going to handle all the Shopify boilerplate. It's going to include webhook subscriptions, OAuth. We're going to give you a Shopify data sync to pull data into your database here in Gadget. I'm going to walk through all this. So let's get started with the actual build. I'm going to just close the AI assistant. You can use it to set up your connection, but I'm going to manually walk through things. I'm going to select my Riley test stuff organization. Now you can choose to create an app in your Shopify dev dashboard for your production environment. You see in Gadget, I am going to build on my development environment. It is all going to be hosted live on the internet. And then I can deploy to production. I don't need that for this tutorial, so I'm just going to uncheck this box, get rid of this, and only create a single app in the Shopify dev dashboard. Now here I'm going to select the API scopes and data models I want from Shopify. So for my app, I'm just going to be building a simple customer account UI extension. It's going to allow customers to add notes to orders. I'm going to go ahead and read my customer data, and I'm actually going to enable customer account authentication. What this will allow me to do is it'll add a new access role to my Gadget app. And I'll be able to enforce multi-tenancy. So I'll be able to relate a note entered by a customer to that customer and to that shop and to that order. I'm going to walk through how we do all this. When I select this, it automatically selects the customer model as well. So that's good. I'm also going to read my orders and I will select my order model. So I'm going to confirm. Then I'm going to open this protected customer data access form. Now, if you're building a public app, you need to go ahead and fill out this form. And then when you release your app and apply to have it on the Shopify App Store, they review what you filled out here. If you're just building a custom app, you can still fill all of this out. What this does is it gives us access to the order and customer data. By default, this protected data is not available. So you can go ahead and fill all this out. If you are building a custom app, your other option is to go to the distribution page and just select custom distribution. Then you don't need to fill out the form. I'll fill out the form just because that's what we list in our tutorial. It's what we link to. So I'm just going to select app functionality for this protected customer data section, and then I am going to select all of these fields. Once again, if you're building a custom app, just go into distribution, select custom. You don't need to provide a store URL. You can just select custom and then go back to your Gadget app and start building. Okay, so I've needed to fill all these out. This is if I were doing a public app, or you can choose to fill it out if you're doing a custom app. Anyways, I've completed my form. Now I'm going to select my dev store to install on. I will just select my checkout branding testing store. And I'll click install. And like I mentioned before, Gadget is going to handle all of Shopify's OAuth for me. So my app will be installed in my Shopify store. And this is fantastic. This is actually our React front end. It is built with React Router version 7 by default. And if I go back to my Gadget app, see, I am connected, I'm installed. If I go to my files, my web folder, this is my React front end here in my admin. I'm not going to touch this again for this tutorial, just wanted to point it out. Now, if I go back to my installs page here, you can see I have got my API scopes granted, registered webhooks. I can go ahead and sync recent data. And what this will do is pull in 10 parent records for each of my parent level Shopify models. So if I go into my models, see, this is what's actually backed or sits in front of my Postgres database. So I've got a Shopify order table with all of these fields or columns. And if I click on data, the data sync has brought in some of my latest orders. Same deal with customer. I have some customer data here in my database. So I'm ready to start actually building my app. I've kind of handled all of Shopify's boilerplate at this point. I can start customizing this app for whatever I'm deciding to build. In this case, a note app. So I'm going to add a note data model, a place to store notes entered by my buyers in the customer account portal. So I'll just go ahead, add a note model. This creates the Postgres table under the hood automatically for me. And I'll just add a body field. We'll leave it a string. String makes sense, and we'll make it required. I can turn off indexing for searching, filtering, and sorting. I will not be searching or sorting or filtering on this body field. Now, I can see a point where search might be interesting. You do get Elasticsearch, an Elasticsearch instance set up for your application. So if I include index and search, this field will be indexed in Elasticsearch, and I'll be able to use the search API as part of my reads. I'm just going to turn it off for now. And what this does is it, one, limits the scope of your search to only select fields. It also helps save storage costs, which is a big benefit. So I'm going to go ahead and add some relationships to this model. I want to relate my note to the customer, to an order, and then to the shop, to the three things. So let's go customer first. I'll add a customer field, change it to belongs to, select my Shopify customer model, and I'll say a Shopify customer can have many notes. I will do the exact same thing for order. Note belongs to Shopify order. Order has many notes. I can make these required. I can also turn off indexing probably. For search, I'm not going to be using search on any of these. And then there is shop, and I will do the exact same thing. It belongs to my Shopify shop model. Shop has many notes, make it required, turn off indexing. So that's fantastic. I've gone ahead, I've set up my table in Postgres, my data model. When I create models in Gadget, I also get an automatically generated CRUD API. So that's create, read, update, delete. And you can see you have create, delete, and update actions here. Now in this tutorial, I'm only going to use my create action. And to get customer multi-tenancy, I want to go ahead and add something to this create action. So normally when I go ahead and create a record, I would have to, if you look at the API snippet over here, manually link to my customer, my order, and my shop. I don't really want to do that from my front end. I will send in the order because that's available as part of my customer extension context. Customer and shop, I can link automatically with the session token. And so my request coming in from my extension is going to have a session token attached, and I can automatically apply that session token to link new records to a customer and a shop here in my create action. I can do the same thing in update delete. I'm not going to walk through those here, but it will look the exact same. So what I'm going to do, if I go back to my tutorial, we're on step 3 here. I'm going to add prevent cross-shop data access to my create action. So if I go in here and I import prevent cross-shop data access, and this is also from Gadget server, but it's Gadget server / Shopify. Perfect. And then I can go ahead, pass in my params, pass in my record, and there we go. Just detail it here in the tutorial. What this will do now is when I create a new note, this prevent cross-shop data access is going to look at the session token on the incoming request and use it to relate the created record to a customer and to a shop. So that's great. And once again, I could also do this on update delete. I'm not going to, but I could for a production app if I were using those APIs. Now I have to update my access control. So I want my customers to be able to both call that create action and then read notes that have been created from the extension. So if I go back to Gadget, I can go to the access control folder, click permissions, click the get ignore there. That was an accident. Go to the permissions. And here we have our created Shopify storefront customers role. So I want to go ahead and enable create and read for my note model. And then I want to add a filter. And I'm just going to call this note.jelly. Jelly is Gadget's expression language. And if I pop this open, I can use it to add a filter. So this will automatically filter return notes on read. And I want to filter by that customer ID. So the related customer field on my note. So what I can do, this is right here. It's where customer ID, and this is going to be the customer ID. I'm just going to copy this. I can write it out. Where customer ID is equal to it's called session.Shopify customer ID. And that's all I need to do, except I need to use the proper declaration of my session variable. So if we go back here, it should match this exactly. All I'm doing, comparing this customer ID on my note records to the customer ID included on the session. If they match, those records will be returned. If they don't, they won't. So this is once again just multi-tenancy for my customers making requests from extensions. And that's my back end. I'm done building. Now I just need to go ahead and build my custom extension. So I'm going to go back to Gadget here. I'm going to use GGT, Gadget's command line tool, to bring my Gadget project down to my local machine and then use the Shopify CLI to generate my extension. So if we just open this up, I do give a sample snippet here in the docs. Easiest way to get the correct GGT command. First, you have to install it locally, but I'm just copying from here in my project. And then if I pop open the terminal and run this, you see it is going to pull my files down to my local machine, and it will keep running in the background. So any changes I make locally will be synced up to my hosted Gadget environment, and vice versa. Any changes I make in my hosted environment will be brought down locally. And this enables me to use my favorite local tools. I can use Cursor, Claude Code, VS Code. I'm going to be using Zed today. It also enables source control, which is obviously pretty handy. So I'm just going to pop open a new tab and go to my Preact extension, and I'll pop her open in Zed. There we go. Let's full screen this, and you can see this is my Gadget project. I've got my API folder with my notes. I've got my create action here. I've got my prevent cross-shop data access function. I've also got my full web folder. We're looking pretty good. So if I just go back to my instructions, I do need to go ahead and add a workspaces definition to my project's package.json file. So if I just open up package.json, I'm just going to add to the bottom here, workspaces, it's going to be an array, and I'm just going to want to add extensions star. Now, if you go ahead and if you accidentally skip this step, you can still generate an extension, but you might be noticing that it is missing a package.json file. So if your extension isn't working properly when you try and run a dev server, check if there's a package.json file. If there isn't one, it's probably because you're missing this workspaces definition in the project root package.json. You can also add an ignore file to prevent the syncing of build and node module files up to your Gadget web editor. I'm just going to skip it for the video, but you can go ahead and do that. It is in the written tutorial. And finally, you can generate your extension. So I'm just going to copy this, pop open my terminal again, and this will just be Shopify app generate extension, which is the command. I'm going to pass in a template, which is customer account UI, and I'm going to call it the note goat extension because it's going to be the goat at adding notes. I'm going to select the same Shopify organization I used to set up my connection in Gadget originally. I'm going to connect to an existing app, and I've never seen it not be the top option. We've already got the development TOML selected, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that. And Shopify, the CLI, will go ahead and create my extension file. So if I go back to my editor, I see I do have an extensions folder now. And inside this extensions folder, I've got my extension TOML. I've got that package.json, and I've got a sample extension that Shopify is providing me. And you see, when I click on this, we're using Preact, not React, but it's still JSX. It will feel pretty familiar. The other thing to notice is that we're using Polaris web components. So if I flip back to my written tutorial now, there's still a couple other things we need to do before we start building. First, we need a couple packages. We've got this Gadget Inc. Shopify extensions and Preact package that I'm going to add to my Gadget project root. I could use my local terminal to do this. I can also just do it here in my Gadget editor. I am going to run a command, yarn add. I am adding this -w, and it's because we have that workspace definition. We need -w to add these packages to my project root. The reason I'm adding these to my project root and not my extensions folder, you see I do have my extension here in my web editor as well. You could add them to your extension package.json. It's helpful to add them to your project root if you have multiple extensions in your app. So this way you only need to install them once. You don't need to install them per extension. Totally up to you if you want to do it per extension though. So there we go. We are installed. Let's move to the next step. Now we need to make some modifications to our extensions TOML file. So I'm going to do this in my editor. First off, I am going to enable network access. Now I want to make a quick note. When you're building your extensions, try to use Shopify meta fields to get your custom data into your extensions, if at all possible, and use the APIs that Shopify is providing for you. Shopify does need to review network access requests for your extensions, so only do them if they are absolutely necessary. Often it's going to be more performant just to load up and use meta fields if you can. So I just wanted to share that note, but because I want to show you how to use your Gadget API in your extensions, I'm going to enable network access. Finally, we're just going to add 2 more extension targets. So what I'm going to build, one of these will be a button on my orders page in my customer account section. One of them will be a modal that pops up when I click that button. So I'm just going to copy these over, add them underneath the order status block, and I'll create files for these as well. Let's just copy and paste the names because that will be much faster. There we go. And let's do it again. Perfect. Now I need to go ahead and build my actual extensions. What I'm going to do to start is actually I'm going to start with my button. I'm going to paste in what Shopify gives me my default, just so that we can compare and see what needs to be done slightly differently when you're building your Gadget extensions. So if you're following this tutorial, you can always just copy and paste. The extension blocks are down here into your extension files. I'm just going to walk through it a bit slower for the tutorial. There is one more step that I almost skipped. We need to go ahead and initialize our Gadget API client. So I am going to go add a new file called api.ts, and I'm going to import a client from Gadget client, my Preact extension, and instead of calling it client, we should call it my Preact extension client. And I can go ahead and export this. I'm going to call it API client. I am going to add an environment selector in here. Now, what I'm going to do for my build is just my node environment. So this will either be development or production. Now, if you have multiple development environments, typically if you're building as a team, every team member will have their own Gadget development environment. Check out our documentation. We do have some information on how to go ahead and manage this. So there we go. This will create an API client for my development environment for my extension. Now I can use this API client to go ahead and make requests to my Gadget backend from within my extension. So if we take a peek at the code we need to do some imports, and then there's a bit of setup before we get to our actual extension. So I'm going to start with these imports up here. I'm going to copy paste them in sections instead of writing from scratch, just for speed. So what I'm doing is I'm importing a provider and a use Gadget hook from my Gadget Inc. Shopify extensions package. Now in this case, we are going /Preact because there is Preact. If you're building an old React extension, you just get rid of the P here and it's /React. I'm using a use maybe find first hook from my Gadget Inc. Preact package, and then I'm going to go ahead and import my API client. Now what we need to do here is typically when you've got your Preact extension, you are calling render on your extension and tying it to the document body. I need an intermediary between this default export and my extension. That's to set up my provider, which will add that session token context to my API client. So any requests I make from within my extension using my API client is session aware. That's where we get that nice multi-tenant reads and writes. So I'm going to go ahead and just create a Gadget extension. And you see here, what we're doing is grabbing the session token from Shopify. I'm just going to go ahead and copy paste this in here. Shopify is just a context object that is provided as part of this extension environment. And I'm just grabbing my session token and I'm using my provider from my Shopify extensions package, passing in my API client and the session token, and then I am wrapping that around my actual extension. Now what I'm going to do in my extension is make use of this use Gadget hook. I'm going to go const. We're going to get the API client. We're also going to get a ready variable. It's just going to be a Boolean. And I'm going to use this API client to make my request. I'm going to use this ready Boolean to go ahead and not start my read request. In this case, I'm just going to be checking to see if a node exists. If it already does for this order, I'm not going to display a button. So I'm only going to allow customers to enter a single order, or enter a note for a single order, so they better get it right. And so what I'm going to be doing here, I'm just going to copy the rest of this. So you can see here, I'm using my use maybe find first hook, passing in API note. So this will go ahead and read my note data. See, if I have an existing note, we'll get it here. I've also got a fetching Boolean and an error to display error message that I'm not making use of here. And you see, I'm pausing this request while my API client is not ready, while this session token is still being set up by the provider. Finally, I am enabling live queries. This just sets up a WebSocket connection between your extension and your backend. This means when I go ahead and add a note for an order, fresh note data will be brought up. So as soon as I create a note in my database, that WebSocket connection will push those results to my front end here, to this hook. I'll have existing note data and my button will be rendered. We're going to see how that works when I actually test it out. And that's all I need to do here. So let's go ahead and now do our modal extension. I'm just going to copy paste the whole blob. It's a bit more code. I guess other thing to point out is, like, you notice we are using S-Button, we are using Polaris web components. I don't have to do any setup for that. We're just using them. Same dealio here in my account action. And this is going to be a modal. Now, the first thing you'll notice from this, if I flip back here, I did add a space. If I add a little space here, we're using a Preact hook, use state. So there are hooks in Preact that will feel familiar if you're used to building in React, use state, use effect, use callback. And then I've got the same stuff I'm pulling in from my Gadget packages. Provider and use Gadget. In this case, I'm using a use action because I'm calling a create on my note. So I want to create notes in my modal. Then I'm importing my API client. And this setup, all this, literally the exact same. Got my Gadget UI extension. That is one thing I didn't change here. Instead of calling extension, I need to call my Gadget extension as part of my default export. Let's go back. The setup is now the same. I'm getting my intermediate UI extension that is setting up this session token with the provider, rendering it on the document body, and then I've got my actual extension wrapped by my provider. I'm using use Gadget to get my API client, and I'm using that API client. This time it's use action hook, API note create. So whenever I call this save note function, which I'm doing here in a save function in my extension, it's going to go ahead, send these parameters to my backend, call that action, and we are using fetching to say when we're saving a note, just to disable the button and display some text. So this is all we're doing. We are calling await save note. You see we are passing in the body, and we're linking to the current Shopify order ID. So this Shopify context, once again, same as in the button extension. It's just provided by Shopify in this extension ecosystem. So I'm getting the order ID from that, and then I'm calling close to close the modal. And once again, this is just customer account action boilerplate using Polaris Web Components. You can see that I've got a text area. I'm using my use state hook to go ahead and update my note state like I would in React. I've got a button that submits. I'm using onClick here. I wonder if I can actually add this onClick as part of the top level context, but this is what I am doing now. I believe I just copied this code from Shopify's own examples. So there we go. I could be wrong about that. And then we have a cancel button that just, once again, calls that Shopify close to close the modal. So we're done building. You can see we're at the end of the tutorial. Let's test this thing out. I already have order data, but if you don't have order data, make sure you create an order in your Shopify admin. Now I can go ahead and stand up and just go Shopify app dev, stand up dev server for my extensions. You can also run a command in the Gadget editor to do this as well, but I'm just going through here because I am already authed with my local Shopify CLI. So I'm choosing the same store. Once again, very important, check out branding testing as I use to set up and install my admin app. I'm gonna press P to open up the Shopify dev console, copy one of these URLs, which should bring me to my customer account section. Now, if you haven't done this recently, you may need to enter a code or grab a code from your email. That's a-okay, but make sure the email you use is also a customer tied to your orders in a store. And then we have add note buttons. We've got a couple of purchases that look suspiciously similar, almost like they are using sample data. If I want to add a note about this rain boot and raincoat combo, nice boots. I don't know why I would add this as a note to my order, but I can. And I can click that add note button. You see it's disabled. I did get a little change of the copy from that text area in my modal, and then it closed, and you see add note is gone. That's because we have that live query working. And so that's the whole app. You could extend this app to make your notes visible to customers, allow them to enter multiple notes, have some sort of back and forth between merchant and customer. This is just showing you how data tenancy works and how you can call your API from the extension. And speaking of data tenancy, let's check it out. I created a note. So when I click on my note data, remember that I was passing in an order ID and I was passing in the body. You don't have to remember, we have the code. I was passing in body and order. I was not passing in shop or customer. So that's what adding this prevent cross-shop data access and using the provider in our extension does. It, once again, attaches the session token to requests. We pull the customer data, we pull the shop information, and we can go ahead and create those relationships automatically. So now only this customer will be able to read this record, and we have a multi-tenant customer authentication system set up and working. That's the whole app build. We're done. Now, just as a quick note, Preact support is only available on Gadget Framework version 1.5. So if you haven't updated, you can go to your settings and just check the framework version, click edit. There are a couple breaking changes you may need to navigate, but you do need to upgrade to 1.5 in order to go ahead and make use of Preact. And that's because of some of the under the hood changes we had to make to support Preact properly. If you have any questions about this tutorial, once again, I will include links to the written tutorial in the video description. I'm also going to go ahead and include a link to our Shopify UI extension docs, and we have samples for admin extensions. We have samples for checkout UI extensions. The setup is largely the same. There are some differences in access control role. From a checkout extension, you'll be making unauthenticated requests because it can be any buyer. You're not necessarily authed in. From admin extensions, because you're already the Shopify app user, you actually don't need to use, just flip over here, might as well. You don't need to use a provider from this Gadgeting Shopify extensions package. There's a provider on this Preact package you can use, and that's because Shopify is automatically adding a token to requests made in admin extensions. So you don't need to go ahead and do it yourself. If you have any questions not covered in our docs or in this tutorial or in this video, go ahead and jump in our developer Discord and feel free to ask. Until next time, I hope you keep building more and coding less with Gadget.